playing with a squeaky ball. I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick tutorial on making a desktop background in GIMP. If you right click in your background and you hit screen resolution, this will give us the size that we want to create our background image. I had to throw the ball. So my screen is set up at 1920 pixels wide by 1010 or 1080 pixels tall. That's all the information we need to know, so we can go ahead and start creating our background. So we're going to open up a new GIMP, and we're going to type in 1920 by 1080, and you're going to use whatever sizes your screen resolution is. You can go larger, you can go smaller, but you generally want to have it fit your desktop. So if you go under advanced options, you can change your different, alright, go play with the ball. You can change your different settings. Color space, you can change it from RGB to grayscale. Background color, transparency, white, foreground color, whatever you want to set that at. I'm just going to leave the standard options set here. Okay, click OK. In my screen recording software, I'm using Ice Cream. Excuse me. That's the name of the app. I'm just going to make this window viewable to everybody. That's the name of the app I'm using, and I just changed the screen magnification to 50%. So this is half of what my full desktop screen will be. Okay, well, with this recording software, I have to use my keyboard shortcuts a lot. So, but what we want to do first is you kind of want to get an idea of the background that you want. If you're going to layer it and give it some depth, kind of like the one I have back here. You're going to put multiple layers in there. So figure out your base color. You can come up with a color scheme, or you can look on the internet and find hexadecimal codes for color schemes. You can find red, green, blue, or RGB values to place in there, or you can simply click on your color selector here and just kind of choose a color based on that. Like you want a bit of a dark violet or something, you go with this, and you can change it, make it darker. You can bring the green scale down. You can change the hue, saturation values, and that's what these symbols stand for here: red, green, blue. So you can just adjust the values to get the color that you're happy with. And go ahead and pick one, and then select OK. If you want to just fill your whole background with that, or you can come over here and select a second color. I'm going to use this muted kind of a bluish green, almost grayish bluish. You can select two colors here, and this is your foreground, this is your background, and you can use your gradient blend tool, and you can choose to do like one color to another just by clicking, holding down, and releasing the mouse, and you can see it kind of slowly fades. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. You can come down here and change the shape of it. See if you want it to kind of be circle or conical, different shapes. I'll show you what these look like. Some of the features that you use uses scripting to do it, and it will cause it to load for a minute. So if you wanted a smaller radius on your shaped image, you could do that. Just something a little different, kind of make it stand out. But let me undo that again, and we'll just go with something. I favor the squarish or the radial ones. They have spirals as well, but I'm a big fan of the radials and the bilinears, and I just like the way they look. So we'll make a circle here, and you can tell there's kind of thicker color there. You don't like it, undo it, make it bigger, make it smaller, put it at an angle, however you want to do it. But you can kind of see a hint of color changing in there. So now that you have your base layer down, let's say you want to add a somewhat of a transparent or opaque, a translucent, kind of a hazy layer to it to give it some depth. We're just going to come in here and go to filters, and we're going to go down to render, clouds, and the fog gives a nice layer. So you choose your color here. Once again, you can copy the values from the previous one if you want. I'm going to go with a little bit darker hue. And you can increase or decrease your turbulence. This is basically how much it'll kind of break up your image. It's hard to explain that one. You'll see. And then your opacity, you could bring that down a little bit if you don't want it to interfere too much. I'm going to try 65%. And you'll notice that it kind of gives it a nice little bit of depth. Now if we make reference back to the background here, and this is basically what I'm showing you how to make. I did not make this background, but I'm making one now, so showing you how to do it on your own. So now we have a nice textured background. Has a little bit of depth to it, and that's a nice base for a starting point. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add another layer, and if we wanted to kind of do a double layer with the text back here like it has, it's using coding, just comments, and basically it looks like C or could be Python programming. It's hard to say. It doesn't quite look like C. It could be PHP, Python, one of those. So we'll just come in here and we're going to create a layer with some code in it, and basically we're going to use the same scheme, and I'm going to show you if you want to get all your colors from the same basic colors here, you can select one of them that you previously used, and what you want to do is just kind of slide your scale down here, your saturation, you want to change your value a little bit and just lighten it up so it's not completely contrasting with it, but it's also not overbearing. It's not blending too much as well. So I'm just going to lighten that up a little bit more, bring it closer to a whitish gray. Okay. So now that we have that color selected, notice we changed it here. If we'd already had text on the canvas, we'd have to use this color box to change it. Out of habit, I like to center my text in the justification. Sometimes I'll use the letter spacing to make it look better. Next thing you want to do, if you want to just go ahead and start slapping some text on the page. Never mind the dogs in the background, they're excited. So we're just going to say comment line. I'm just going to act like I'm typing up some pseudocode or some code or something. And instead of actually centering the justification, we're going to go with a left alignment. And we're just going to say for x equals 0, and we're gonna give this a $sign, act like it's PHP code. X equals 0, because I'm a big fan of PHP. I like a lot of different languages. Count array. Okay, so what I'm basically doing is just typing up a code that will actually be, it's a usable code. We're just going to say echo array value. x. So what we're doing in this code, it's actually a legitimate code. We're going to set the array value to an array of letters, and inside this array of letters we're going to put hello world, but we're going to give each one a different each one of them will be a different key value. Okay, so LLO space WORLD. And this is an actual functional set of PHP code. I don't know if you can see it. It's going to be kind of hard to see because it's tiny print. But that's the idea. I mean, there's tiny print back there. Let me put another comment line in here and say loop through array print each value. There's our comment. Okay, so this is just going to echo out hello world once it completes the array. And that's just one little line of code. As you can see, the print is fairly small. If you want it to look more like a console code or something, that's where you go to your fonts. These are downloadable. You can download fonts if you search, I don't remember the name of the site that I use most frequently for fonts, but if you look up free font downloads, you'll find a plethora of them that you can get for free. Download them to your computer and unzip them into your fonts folder, which I believe is C on Windows. It should be your primary drive, like C drive, Windows fonts. And you just place them in that folder, and then you restart GIMP, and it should find them. So I think Lucida Sans console is in here, which is a nice font. Lucida console, there it is. And there's that makes for a nice. That's a little too wide though. Let's try the Unicode. There we go. We'll go with Unicode. Ubuntu is another good standby. I really like that font style. So we're going to say next thing we'll do is check for user credentials. If is set user, and this is going to be check password to see if it matches SQL. Let's just say query equals, we're gonna select username, password. Of course, you probably won't have these lines in your database, but from users where user ID equals escape our string there, and we called it what, user, and we're going to append the rest of this string and password. We'll just pass WD, make it a little different. Notice I'm using the tilde characters. That's an old practice I have from previous sequels. I don't believe you need it really ever when using your PHP code, but I do it out of habit. So I'm going to see if this matches the password, and then we're going to close that line, and we're going to get our results by passing our connection or query. Alright, if results, so if it exists, log in the user set session variable. Okay, most logins you'll use a session variable. We're just going to set session user equal to, and we're going to encrypt their username with their password. And that's basically what we'll do there. And then we'll say else. So if we didn't find matching credentials, bad password, and we'll just print to the screen password wrong password. Okay. Alright, so there we've got a bit of code on the screen here, and as you can see, one of these is a pretty long line. What we're going to do here is, just in case the user variable isn't set or the form wasn't submitted, set user to guest, and what we'll do there is say session user equals guest. Alright, so we just got a nice little bit of code there. At the very top of this code, we're going to want to start our session. So we'll just use session register, our session start. And put a couple lines of white space in there, and separate our code snippets here. So now we've got a nice little bit of code on the page, and what we're going to do in a minute is kind of what's done in this background here. Well, we've got the light code up front, and it's a clearer text, and then in the background you can see that it's not as clear. It's a little blurred, and then a little darker. So we're going to create that same effect to give some dimension to the image here. But first, let's fill in a couple more lines. Actually, let's leave it at that. Let's drop the size of this down. I'm going to hit Control A to select all of it, and drop the size down to like 14. Make it even smaller, and my phone's going to meep. And I'm going to create another text box. Just going to create it right over here, so we can type some more code in. And this time we'll do something simple. We'll just say process formulas or something, so we can do some calculations in this one. We'll open it up with a PHP declaration tag, close it with the PHP declaration tag, and we'll start formula big A equals A squared plus B squared. I'm using the caret, which is Shift-6, equals C squared. Little Pythagorean theorem here. And then we're going to do another formula. Formula B, we'll call it. And we're going to set that equal to x times we'll just say 9 times log 10 x minus 9 plus 25. What that is the that's the formula to figure out reputation, users' reputation in steemit.com. So we have a couple formulas there, and we're going to allow for input. So if is set, actually we don't even need that, if a, up here we need to set these as variables. We'll just say if is numeric a and is numeric b. Make sure you close out all your parentheses. Pythagorean. Formula for triangles to get the angle of C. We'll say result equals formula A Okay, so what I did up here, I actually set these as variables. I know this is turning into a bit of a PHP tutorial as well, and I didn't intend for that to happen, but you can skip through this part if you'd like. I know it's hard to read at this size anyway, but I kind of wanted to cover all the bases here on how to create a background. I will cut any bits of this video that get too long or stale. But up here, what I should have done, instead of setting the formula A to an actual variable, is I should have created a function called that formula A, have it accept two variables. We're going to accept integer. Well, let's just do this. We're going to accept variable A and variable B. And since this is a function, we need to place this code. I'm just going to control X, control V. This code inside. So there's the formula. And what we're going to do is put c squared on this side because that's the value that we're looking for. Okay. And then out here we can say C is equal to C divided by C, and we would return C. Okay. Same thing for formula B. It's not actually a variable but a function, and it's going to accept one value x. Now you can name the values inside of your function, your variables. I mean, you can name them something different than the input, because that's just a placeholder. So let me paste this in here. and let's set the answer equal to y. So we're going to do the entire process inside of one variable, and then we're going to just return y. Okay. And those are our functions. Now we just have to okay, now down here we have our conditional statement if variable a is numeric, which also basically means that if it's set and that variable b is numeric, which means an integer, then we are all set to process the result using formula A, and we need to include formula, variable A, and variable B. Now we can print our result, which we don't even have to set that to a variable. All we're going to do is instantiate the function, no $. Boom, and it will print. Okay, if we're going to do the same thing, variable x, and this would be the reputation formula. And we'd simply call formula b with the value of x. Now see, because code is so finicky and I forgot to put formula A here, that would not have worked. It would have thrown an error. Calling an unknown method or function. Okay, so now we have another line of code here. It's pretty much going right to the bottom of the page. You can also move your text box with the move arrows here. Make sure that you don't have the finger, that you have all the arrows if you're going to move it. Okay, just float this over here. I'll select my lower text layer and float that as well. Real tiny print, so it's hard to get a hold of a section. There we go. I'm going to float that over a little bit here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a copy of this layer, right click on it, duplicate layer, move this layer, move this layer underneath that one. I don't know if my mouse is going to let me do that in the screen here. Maybe if I could shift click, control down, shift down. No. Well, we're not going to move the layer in the video because it doesn't like me using my mouse. But instead, we're going to offset this layer anyway and put it right about here. Since it's not letting me move it, I'm going to use my original layer to turn into the blurred layer. I'm also going to move that slightly, and I'm going to change the color using my text tool. Click in the box, Control A. And we're going to select the color here. We're going to make it slightly darker. Bring a little bit more blue into it, basically. Okay. We're going to drop the opacity of this layer down. Then we can select in here so you can see what you're doing. And then we're just going to blur it slightly using our filter blur. And there you go. Repeat the same process for your next one. Right click, duplicate, move your layer around a little bit. We're going to use our duplicate as our primary layer. Set that up here. Go back down to your lower layer, move that slightly if you'd like, wherever you want it. Again, text tool, select it, Control A, choose the color, a little slightly darker one, which will already be selected there. Hit OK. Come up here, transparency down to 60 something, or wherever you want it. Filters, repeat blur, and there you go. Select your background to take a look at the whole picture. And that looks nice. Now you can add some more code if you want to, or you can line it up differently. But as you can see, it kind of gives you a little bit of dimension to your background there. So it's a pretty simple process, and that's how it works. Now if you wanted to add different elements, add whatever you want, personalize it, you wanted to sign it maybe, you can click on one of your text layers to put your signature on the top, or you could select the lowest layer and type your text in and then move it up. I recommend selecting a higher level, upper layer, because it'll be easier to move your text around without having to hide anything in case any of your text layers take up the whole space. So go ahead and choose a color for your signature, and I'm just going to go ahead and go back to that lighter color that we had, which is already selected here, and I'm going to change my font type to something, you know, a little bit different so it stands out. We'll try Katie, go up to about 20, and let's just slap it in there and see what it looks like. So I'm going to put at tunnel rat, and I want that a little bigger, so I'll just use my font size tool over here. Okay, looks good at about 50. And I'm just going to put my the URL in there for Steamit. Maybe drop that size down a little bit. Meep meep. Okay, move that over some. Alright, again, I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to take my lower layer. I guess I'm going to have to move my top layer first. Normally I would use my original layer as the original, and then take my duplicate and modify that just out of habit. But it really doesn't matter. You can rename these layers to be something meaningful if you want by right clicking and saying edit layer attributes, and you can just change the name of it there. So I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to bring the opacity down into the 60s range. I'm going to change the color. Control A. Using this darker color. Okay. And I'm going to blur this text as well, so it's a little larger. I might even move that back over to kind of coincide with that a little bit. There we go. So that's basically a background. I'm going to zoom this into 100% so you can see that the text is a little bit clearer at this size. The blurred text in the background does in fact look like it's faded away a little bit. But if I zoom this back out, the text looks a lot smaller. This is how it would look on a smaller screen. And I think what I'm going to do after doing that is actually just click on each one of these unmodified text fields and just shrink the size a little bit down to maybe a 16. Okay. They were already at 16. They were at 14. I mean, I'm shrinking them down to 12. So you've got little code, you've got big code. also kind of adds to the effect a little bit. And it's okay to have some blank space in there, kind of directs the eyes around the canvas. So that's a basic background. If you want, you can duplicate these multiple times and put them in line, kind of like was done with this one here. I'm going to minimize that again. This is a lot of inline code here, a lot of procedural code, just right in line. And procedural code is a little easier to write sometimes for people because it's basically if this, do that, a lot of conditional statements, some functions. Object-oriented code can get a little bit more complicated because you're dealing with classes and pointer references. But as you can see here, a lot of this is all procedural code, and from the looks of it, I think this is Python. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of code in there, but we basically achieved the same look, the same basic layout that they have by doing it this way. Now it looks like they had additional layers back here. They were offset quite a bit more than we had offset ours. So that's okay. Do what you like with it. If you want to move stuff around even more, you kind of want to keep it generally uniform in the sense that if you have code somewhere and it's offset by X amount, you want to offset the rest of it by X amount. We can even just swap these two codes out. Like this here. Even have it leading off the page a little bit. But there you go. You've got a lot of different things you can do with this. I'd probably move this signature now. Maybe up to here. Or, whoop, no problem, undo that move. And then this might, whoop, again, make sure you got that that pointer just where it needs to be. And in case you cannot grab something that you're trying to grab, there we go. Make sure you have the layer selected. Put this over here. Just to, there we go. And there you have it. Again, you want to preview what it looks full size, just use your zoom tool down here. Okay. There you have it. And that about concludes this video. What I'll do is I'll save this. And you can do save as or save. I'm just going to save this to the documents. That's fine. I'll just call this code BG. Save it, and then to use it, I need to export it. And I'll just export it as a JPEG. You can use the JPG. You can use a file type extension selector down here, or just type it in up here. So it's going to be a little bit of a larger file as a JPEG. Export that. We'll do 90% quality. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is minimize this. Select that file. Actually, I think I saved it in, there it is. Right click on it and set as desktop background. Okay. And you can see, I'm not showing my entire screen in here, but you can see that it's basically the same look. So there you have it. That's how you do a dimensional background.